Kid Icarus was released in July of 1987. This vertical platformer was developed and published by Nintendo with programming help from Tosei. This title is the first in Nintendo's Kid Icarus series with 2 sequels to follow, as well as the first of the 3 Nintendo Silver Box games. The game's plot has the game's protagonist Pit on a quest for 3 treasures which are needed to rescue Angel Land. The game is a vertical platformer with several RPG elements. As you progress through the stages, you're able to upgrade your bow, your armor, as well as a few other items. You're also able to purchase items that'll help you in-game, for instance, wings that'll prevent you from one falling death and allow you to fly up to a safe location. As you ascend each level, you'll have to deal with hordes of enemies. Many of the enemies in this game have movement like you'd see in a shmup, which feels kind of odd in a platforming title, but it is possible to deal with all the game's enemies if you learn how they move and what they do. Like Ice Climbers, the main goal of most of the levels is to move upward. The ability to move off one side of the screen and appear on the other is taken from the original Mario Bros. Arcade game and reappears here, as it's an integral part of the game's platforming, as it's completely necessary to move forward in many of the game's areas. Throughout the game's levels, there's several doors you can enter which have basically the same room with different things happening in them. Sometimes you'll find an empty room, although other times you'll find a merchant who will sell you power-ups for the hearts you collect off dead enemies. There's also some of these rooms where you'll be able to upgrade permanently, provided you're able to pass a test of endurance, which throws waves of enemies at you until you're either dead or you've prevailed. Once you've left a room, you're unable to ever enter it again. Many of Kid Icarus' levels have you vertically ascending the stage, however the game does feature a few horizontal scrolling levels and labyrinth levels at the end of each stage. The fortress or labyrinth levels have you progressing through a non-linear area where you can move to the top, bottom, left, or right sides of the screen, which will take you around the labyrinth's maze, eventually leading to a boss at the end of the level. Thanks to the game's RPG elements, it makes it extremely complex compared to previous NES titles. The game's branching mazes in the labyrinth areas are unparalleled to this point in the NES's life cycle in 1987. Kid Icarus leaves its mark as a turning point for the NES console, as its gameplay is drastically more complex than anything released previously on the console, and it opened the doors as to what an NES game can be. Although despite how interesting it is as a turning point in NES gaming, it remains NES hard. Kid Icarus is an extremely hard game that does get easier the further you get in with the use of the game's upgrade systems. Just starting out though, the game is brutal. Platforming is a bit of a chore as the game's physics are unique and slippery. Your momentum will affect you drastically, and sometimes just moving right or left, it's hard to predict how far you're going to go. You start out with barely any health, and the enemies in this game are vicious, and without skill, they'll drain your life quick. Difficult enemies, combined with the game's platforming, makes the game incredibly difficult. Graphically, Kid Icarus looks very clean and has the black background and Nintendo Arcade look to it. However, at this point in 1987, many Konami titles are already miles ahead of this game, so the graphics are fairly poor when this game was released by comparison. The main level music is great, and the game has some really unnerving and spooky sounding tunes that give me goosebumps today. The game's high difficulty leading to high tension is well accompanied by this game's forward-moving and often unnerving soundtrack. Overall, Kid Icarus is a major step forward in many ways for the Nintendo Entertainment System. It introduces some of the earliest RPG elements in a game on the console. The game also features unique vertical scrolling levels as well as multiple direction dungeon mazes, which adds to the game's complexity. On the downside, this game doesn't push the console graphically, and the game's difficulty is ramped up so high from the start, it's a hard game to get into and enjoy. Kid Icarus is worth checking out as it introduces so much to the console, but the difficulty can be unforgiving, so you'll never actually see many of the features the game adds to the console, which makes it kind of a hard game to fully recommend to anyone. NES Chronology is a Patreon-supported show, and would not be possible without the support of its patrons. If you'd like to support the show and receive some perks, click the logo and give what you can.